Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house!" Ethan yelled at me with a fury I had never seen in his eyes before, but we were in my house. In the house I built brick by brick, working day and night for 30 years. I stood frozen in my own kitchen, feeling as if I'd been slapped. My son, my own son, was kicking me out of my own home to defend a woman he had only known for 2 years. Rebecca was standing there with a triumphant smirk, her arms crossed, watching as my Ethan humiliated me in front of her. It all started over something so simple. Rebecca had moved my garden plants without asking, and when I told her to please not touch my things without telling me first, she shot back that this was her house now too. When I tried to explain that I had been taking care of those plants for 15 years, Ethan exploded as if I had insulted his wife. My name is Marissa Miller. I'm 69 years old, and that morning I felt like I no longer recognized the son I had raised. The same little boy whose diapers I changed, who I spoon-fed until he was 4 because he was so picky, who I carried in my arms when he had a fever, now looked at me as if I were a stranger. I was born in a small town where mothers were respected until the last day of their lives, where sons took off their hats when speaking to their parents and never raised their voice. But here I was in the big city watching my own son disrespect me for a woman who didn't even know my story. When I was 22, I came to this city with my husband Andrew. May he rest in peace, and a baby in my arms. We had nothing but 2 old suitcases and the hope of giving our son a better life. Andrew worked in construction from 5 in the morning until 8 at night, and I washed other people's clothes at a public laundromat. I remember the day we decided to buy this piece of land perfectly. It was a vacant lot full of rocks and weeds, but it only cost $3,000. Andrew told me, "Marissa, we're going to build our home here." And I believed him, even though it seemed impossible at the time. For the first 5 years, we lived in a tiny tin shack while we saved up for materials. I sold homemade pies in the mornings, cleaned houses in the afternoons, and at night, I sewed red and green dresses for the ladies in the fancy part of town. Every dollar I earned, I put into a coffee can I hid under the mattress. Ethan was still little when Vincent, my second son, was born. With 2 children to feed and clothe, the money was never enough, but I never gave up. I would get up at 4 in the morning to bake, take the kids to school, go to work, come home to cook, and go to bed well after midnight sewing. When Andrew died in a work accident, Ethan was 15 and Vincent was just 12. I was left alone with 2 teenagers, a half-built house, and debts that seemed like mountains. But I never thought about giving up. I worked harder than ever before in my life. I sold food at the factory gates, washed clothes in the early morning, and babysat on weekends. Anything to make sure my sons didn't feel their father's absence. Anything so they could get an education and have the life I never had. Ethan was always my pride and joy. He was smart, studious, respectful. When he told me he wanted to be an engineer, I sold my sewing machine to pay for his college tuition. It was worth $1,000. It was my tool for work, but I didn't hesitate for a second. It was for my son's education. For 5 years, I stayed up late ironing other people's clothes to pay for his studies. My hands cracked, my back ached, but every time I saw Ethan with his books, I knew it was all worth it. The day he graduated, I cried with happiness. My son was an engineer. My sacrifice had paid off. Vincent also did well for himself. He studied to be a computer technician and now works at a big company where he earns good money. He always visits me, brings me flowers, asks how I'm doing. But Ethan changed completely since he met Rebecca. He met her at a work party 2 years ago. Rebecca is a 35-year-old woman divorced with no kids who works in an office and is always very put together with her red dresses and high heels. From the first day he brought her home, I felt something strange in the air. It's not that I didn't want Ethan to get married. I always dreamed of seeing him happy with a good woman who truly loved him. But Rebecca had a way of looking at my house as if it were too small, too old, too humble for her. Her eyes scanned my furniture with disdain, as if everything I had bought with so much effort was worthless. At first it was small things. When she came for dinner, she always had a comment about the food. The sauce was too spicy, the rice was too watery, they cooked differently at her old house. Ethan always defended her, telling me not to be so sensitive, that Rebecca was just trying to help. One day they came over and told me they were getting married. I was happy, of course, though. I felt a strange pang inside. Ethan was my son, my companion, the only one left with me in this house since Vincent moved out on his own. But I swallowed my fears and supported them. I gave them the $3,000 I had saved up for a nice wedding. It was the money I had put away in case I ever got sick and needed expensive medicine, but I thought my son's happiness was more important. Rebecca barely thanked me, as if it were my obligation to give them that money. After the wedding, Ethan told me that he and Rebecca were going to stay in my house while they saved up to buy their own. I accepted gladly. I thought it would be wonderful to have our family together again, that maybe Rebecca and I could be like a mother and daughter, that she would help me with the housework. But from the very first day they arrived as a married couple, everything changed. Rebecca started moving my things without asking. She changed the living room curtains to some green ones she liked better. She moved my family photos to put up her own. She reorganized my kitchen her way, putting my pots in places I couldn't reach. When I told Ethan to ask me before changing things, he would reply that Rebecca lived here now too, that she had a right to feel comfortable. But I didn't understand why my comfort no longer mattered. It was my house, the house I had built with my own hands and my own sweat. Rebecca started inviting her friends over without telling me. They would arrive in the afternoons, sit in my living room, drink coffee from my pantry, and talk about me as if I wasn't there. They'd say things like, what a shame it was that Ethan had to live in such an old house, that surely when they had kids, they'd need to move somewhere bigger and more modern. One afternoon, I overheard her telling a friend on the phone that living with her mother-in-law was very uncomfortable, that I controlled her too much, that I didn't let her do anything her way. It hurt so much to hear her talk about me like that when I had done everything possible to make her feel welcome. Ethan started to change with me. He no longer asked how my day was. He no longer sat with me in the evenings to watch our TV shows like we used to. He no longer helped me with the heavy groceries. All his attention was on Rebecca, on making her happy, on giving her everything she wanted. When I turned 69, they barely wished me a happy birthday. Before, Ethan always bought me a cake and brought me flowers. This time, Rebecca told him they should just take me to a cheap restaurant for dinner so they wouldn't have to clean dishes at home. We went to a horrible place where the food tasted like cardboard, and it cost only $20 for the three of us. I started to feel invisible in my own home. Rebecca would put the TV on whatever channel she wanted without asking. She would occupy the bathroom for hours in the morning, using up all the hot water. She filled the refrigerator with expensive food that only she ate, leaving less space for my things. When I tried to talk to Ethan about these problems, he would tell me I was exaggerating, that Rebecca was a hardworking woman who deserved respect. But I didn't understand why respect for her meant disrespect for me. One night I heard them talking in their room. Rebecca was telling him that I was too controlling, that I didn't let them live in peace, that I was always meddling in their business. Ethan replied that I was just used to living alone, that in time I would get used to having them there. But I wasn't meddling in their business. I just wanted them to respect mine. I just wanted to keep feeling like my house was still my house, not a borrowed place where I was the awkward guest. Rebecca started cooking only for herself and Ethan. She would make portions for two and tell me there were leftovers in the fridge from yesterday if I was hungry. I, who had cooked for my family for 50 years, now had to heat up cold food in my own kitchen. On weekends, they would go out together without inviting me. They went to the movies, to malls, to restaurants, and would come back late at night telling jokes and laughing while I stayed home alone watching television. Before, Ethan and I used to go out together on Sundays. We'd go to the market, buy plants for the garden, have breakfast at some street stand. One day I decided to address the problem directly. I told them I felt like I was no longer welcome in my own home, that we needed to set some rules so we could live together better. Rebecca looked at me with those cold eyes I knew so well and said that if I wasn't comfortable with the situation, maybe I should find another place to live. Ethan said nothing. He just stayed quiet, looking away as if the conversation had nothing to do with him. His silence hurt more than any shout. My own son was leaving me alone in this argument, allowing his wife to suggest I leave my own home. That night, I cried in silence, covering my face with a pillow so they wouldn't hear me. It was the first time in many years that I felt completely alone and abandoned. The following days were even worse. Rebecca had realized Ethan wasn't going to defend me, so her behavior became more brazen. She started moving things around when I went out to run errands as if she were marking her territory. One Tuesday, I came back from the market and found that she had moved all my garden plants. She had put them in a corner where they barely got any sun, telling me she needed that space for a new table and chairs she wanted to buy. I had cared for those plants for 15 years. Each one had its own story, its perfect spot where I knew it would thrive. When I explained that the plants would die in that corner, she told me that if I was so worried, I could give them to a neighbor. She talked about my plants as if they were trash in the way. Ethan was there listening to the whole conversation, reading his newspaper without saying a word. I told Rebecca to please not move my things without asking me first, that this was my house, and I had spent many years organizing it a certain way, that I understood she lived here now too, but that we could reach agreements without anyone feeling bad. That's when Ethan lifted his head from the newspaper and looked at me with a face I had never seen on him. His eyes were full of rage as if I had said something terrible. He jumped to his feet and walked towards me with his fists clenched. "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house!" He yelled at me with a voice that sounded like a stranger's. "This is her house now too, and if she wants to move the plants, she'll move them. You have no right to forbid her from doing anything." I froze. Her house. My son had called my house, her house referring to Rebecca. The house that I had built brick by brick, paying for every cent with my sweat and my tears, was now hers. And I, the real owner, had no right to an opinion. Rebecca stood behind Ethan with her arms crossed and a little smirk of satisfaction. She had gotten what she wanted. She had turned my son against me. She had gotten him to yell at me and disrespect me. She looked so pleased, so sure of her victory. I told Ethan to lower his voice, that I was his mother and I deserved respect, that we could talk like adults without needing to shout. But he kept yelling, telling me I was a stubborn old woman who didn't understand that things had changed, that it wasn't just my house anymore. Rebecca came over and put her hand on Ethan's arm as if to comfort him, as if I were the villain in the story. She told him in a syrupy voice not to get upset that I was from another generation, and it was hard for me to adapt to change. She spoke about me as if I were a spoiled child or a senile old woman. In that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just about the plants or Ethan's words or Rebecca's mocking smile. It was about everything combined, the months of small humiliations, of silent slights of feeling invisible in my own home. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the show they were waiting for. I looked at both of them in silence for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Then I turned around and went to my room without saying a word. That night, lying in my bed, I made a decision. I was not going to let them treat me like this anymore. I was not going to beg for respect in my own house. I was not going to walk on eggshells to avoid bothering Princess Rebecca and my son, who had become her servant. The next day was Friday. Ethan and Rebecca had a habit of going out on Friday nights and coming back very late. That Friday, after they left, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called a locksmith. I explained the situation to the man who came. He was an older man about 60 who listened to me patiently. He told me he'd seen many similar cases, that it was becoming more common for grown children to disrespect their parents. He changed all the locks on the house for $150. I also called Vincent and told him everything that had happened. My younger son was furious when I explained how Ethan had yelled at me how Rebecca had disrespected me. He told me I did the right thing by changing the locks, that it was about time I set some boundaries. Vincent offered to let me stay at his apartment that night, but I said no. This was my house, my home, the place I had built with so much effort. I wasn't going to be the one to leave. If someone had to find another place to live, it wasn't the owner of the property. I went to bed early that Friday, but I couldn't sleep. I knew that when Ethan and Rebecca came back and couldn't get in there was going to be a huge problem. But I also knew there was no turning back. I had already made the decision to reclaim my dignity. Around 1 a.m, I heard Ethan's car pull up, then his footsteps at the entrance, the sound of the key trying to open the door. Silence. More jangling of keys. Rebecca telling him maybe he had the wrong key. Ethan trying every key on his keychain. Then I heard their voices getting agitated. Rebecca asking what was wrong, why they couldn't get in. Ethan saying the keys didn't work, that something was wrong with the lock. I heard them walking around the house trying to find an open window, knocking on doors. Finally, Ethan started banging on the front door, shouting my name. "Mom, open the door! Mom, what's going on?" Rebecca was also yelling, asking why I had changed the locks, telling me it was a childish act of revenge. I stayed in my bed in silence, listening to them get desperate outside. For the first time in months, I felt in control of the situation. For the first time, they were the ones outside begging, and I was the one with the power to decide. Ethan kept knocking for half an hour. His voice grew more desperate. "Mom, please, we're cold. Mom, we just want to come in and sleep. Mom, we'll talk tomorrow, but just let us in now." Rebecca had stopped shouting and was now talking to Ethan in a low voice. She was probably telling him to call my phone to find a hotel to do something to resolve the situation. But I had already unplugged the house phone. After a while, I heard them leave. They probably went to find a motel to spend the night. I stayed awake until dawn, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for having to go to such extremes with my own son. Relief for having reclaimed the peace of my home. On Saturday morning, I got up early as always. I made coffee, watered my plants, cleaned the house. All in silence, without rushing, without having to listen to complaints about my way of doing things. It was the first morning in months that I had breakfast in peace in my own kitchen. Around 10 in the morning, my cell phone started ringing. It was Ethan. His voice sounded tired, defeated. "Mom, we need to talk. We're at Rebecca's friend's house, but we at least need to get our clothes and our things." I told him we could talk, but first he had to apologize to me for yelling at me for disrespecting me in my own house. There was a long silence. Then he said yes, he was wrong, that we could fix things if I opened the door for them. But I had already learned that Ethan's promises weren't worth anything anymore, that as long as Rebecca was manipulating him, he would always put her first. I told him that if he wanted to talk, he could come alone, that Rebecca was not welcome in my house until she apologized to me for all the disrespect. Ethan told me that was impossible, that Rebecca was his wife and they went everywhere together, that if I didn't receive both of them, then neither would come. I told him that was fine, that it was his decision, and I hung up the phone. Throughout Saturday, Ethan called me 5 more times. Each call was more desperate than the last. By the third call, he no longer sounded angry. He sounded worried. He told me they needed to get their work clothes for Monday, that they had important documents in their room, that it wasn't fair for me to punish them like this. I replied that I wasn't punishing them, that I had simply decided that only people who respected me would live in my house, that if he wanted to continue living with me, he had to choose between his wife and his mother, that he couldn't have it both ways anymore. On the 4th call, Ethan started begging. "Mom, please don't do this. We're a family. Rebecca is crying. She doesn't understand why you're so angry. We can talk and fix everything, but we need to get into the house." It was a lie that Rebecca was crying. That woman hadn't shed a real tear in her entire life, but I could tell that Ethan was desperate, that he had realized I was serious this time. On the 5th call late in the evening, Ethan changed his strategy. He told me that if I didn't open the door, he would have to call the police, that it was illegal for me to keep them from their belongings, that they also had rights because they had been living there. I told him to call whoever he wanted, that the house was in my name, that I paid all the bills, that I had the deed in order, that the police would side with me because I was the sole legal owner of the property. Ethan fell silent. He knew I was right. On Sunday morning, I didn't receive any calls. I thought maybe Ethan had gotten the message and was looking for an apartment for him and his princess. But around 11 in the morning, I heard voices outside my house. I peeked through the window and saw Ethan standing on the sidewalk talking on the phone. He looked like he hadn't slept well. His clothes were wrinkled. He looked tired and desperate. Rebecca wasn't with him. She had probably stayed at her friend's house waiting for Ethan to solve the problem. Ethan hung up the phone and approached my door. He knocked softly, not like on Friday night when he had banged desperately. His voice sounded different, more humble, almost like when he was a boy and had done something mischievous. "Mom, it's me. Can we talk? I came alone like you said. Please open the door." I hesitated for a moment. Part of me wanted to open it, to hug him, to forgive him, and have everything go back to the way it was. But I knew that if I gave in now, Rebecca would return triumphant, and everything would be worse than before. I went to the door, but didn't open it. "Where's your wife?" I asked through the door. "She stayed at Chloe's, her friend's house. I came alone because I want to talk to you. Mom, we need to fix this. Did you come to apologize for yelling at me in my own house?" Ethan took a long time to answer. Yes, Mom, forgive me. I was wrong to yell at you. But you also have to understand that Rebecca is my wife now, and I need you two to get along. I opened the door and saw him. He looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes, a 2-day beard, the same clothes from Friday. I felt sorry seeing him like that, but I couldn't let that pity make me forget everything that had happened. Come in, I said. Let's talk in the living room. Ethan came in and sat on the armchair where his father used to sit before he died. He ran his hands over his face and sighed deeply. I sat across from him, waiting for him to start talking. Mom, I know things haven't been good lately. Rebecca told me that you treat her badly, that you don't accept her as part of the family. And maybe I've gotten too defensive of her. He was already starting off wrong. He still believed his wife's version, still thought I was the villain of the story. But I decided to hear him out completely before responding. But Mom, he continued, changing the locks was too much. You can't just leave us on the street like that. We're your children, your family. This is our house too. I stopped him right there. No, Ethan, this is my house. I bought it, I paid for it, I built it. You are my son, and you will always be welcome here, but with conditions. And one of those conditions is that you respect me. But I do respect you, Mom. Do you respect me? Is yelling at me in front of your wife? Respecting me is telling me I have no right to an opinion about my own plants respecting me? Is allowing that woman to talk to me as if I were a burden respecting me? Ethan lowered his head. I knew that deep down he knew I was right, but his pride and his emotional dependence on Rebecca wouldn't let him fully admit it. Rebecca respects you too, Mom. It's just that you two are very different. She comes from another family. She has different customs. You need to give her time to adapt. Time. Ethan, it's been 8 months since you got married. How much time does she need to learn to say please and thank you? How much time to learn not to move things around without asking, look, Mom, this is how it is. Rebecca is my wife now. I love her, and I'm always going to defend her. If you can't accept that, then we have a very big problem. There it was, the truth. Ethan had come to talk to me, but he hadn't come to truly apologize. He had come to give me an ultimatum disguised as a conversation. Either I accepted Rebecca with all her slights and mistreatment, or I lost my son forever. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything I had sacrificed for this son. The years working double shifts to pay for his studies, the sleepless nights when he was sick, the thousands of dollars I had spent on his education, his clothes, his whims. Ethan, I said in a very calm voice, I love you too, but love can't be a one-way street. If you truly love me, you also have to defend me when your wife disrespects me. Rebecca doesn't disrespect you, Mom. You're just too sensitive. Ethan stood up and started pacing the living room. He looked nervous, desperate. He knew the conversation wasn't going as he had planned. Look, I need you to give me the new keys. Rebecca and I are going to keep living here while we save for our own apartment. But I promise we'll talk to her so she's more considerate of you. More considerate? Ethan, your wife suggested I leave my own house. Does that seem considerate to you? She was angry. She didn't mean it. Of course she meant it. And you stayed silent when she said it. That was the last straw, Ethan. My own son leaving me alone while his wife was humiliating me. Ethan sat down again. He held his head in his hands. I could see he was struggling internally. Part of him knew I was right, but the other part couldn't accept it because it would mean admitting he was wrong, that he had failed as a son. Okay, Mom. I'll talk to Rebecca. I'll tell her to apologize to you, but give me the keys, please. We can't keep sleeping in other people's houses. No, Ethan. Forced apologies are worthless. Your wife needs to realize on her own that she has treated me badly. And you need to decide if you're going to continue allowing her to disrespect me. And in the meantime, we stay on the street. You're not going to be on the street. You have a good job. You earn good money. You can rent an apartment. You can stay in a hotel. You can go to her parents' house. You have options. But Mom, we don't have money saved for a deposit on an apartment. Everything we earn we spend on living expenses. That's not my problem, Ethan. You are married adults. You have to solve your adult problems. Ethan looked at me with a face I had never seen before. It was a mixture of surprise pain and something like fear. I think he was realizing for the first time that his mother had changed, that she was no longer the woman who gave in to everything just to keep the peace. He was quiet for several minutes. I stayed quiet too, letting him absorb the new reality. Finally he spoke, but his voice sounded different, smaller. "Are you really not going to give me the keys? I'm really not going to give you the keys. But the door to this house will always be open for you, Ethan. Only for you. When you decide that your mother deserves respect and consideration." Ethan stood up again. He headed for the door, but before leaving, he turned to me. "Okay, Mom. If that's your decision, I respect it. But I want you to know that you're destroying our family because of your pride." "No, Ethan. Our family started being destroyed the day you allowed your wife to disrespect me. I'm just trying to save what's left of my dignity." Ethan left my house without saying goodbye. I watched him from the window walking to his car with his shoulders slumped, defeated. I knew he was going back to Rebecca, and she would ask him what happened. I knew he would tell her about our conversation, and that she would be furious because I hadn't given in. I stood at the window until the car disappeared. My heart felt broken, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I had been able to speak without interruption, without anyone telling me I was exaggerating or being too sensitive. On Monday morning, I got up early as usual. I made my coffee, read the newspaper, watered my plants. It was strange to have the house so quiet without Rebecca's shouts demanding the neighbors turn down their music, without her complaints about the water not being hot enough. Around 10 in the morning, I received a call from Vincent. He told me that Ethan had contacted him, that he had told him I had kicked them out of the house. He asked if it was true and if I was okay. I explained the whole situation. I told him about the months of disrespect, about how Ethan had yelled at me about the conversation on Sunday. Vincent was quiet for a moment and then told me I had done the right thing, that it was about time Ethan learned that actions have consequences. He also told me that Ethan had tried to get him to talk to me to convince me to give them the keys back. But Vincent had told him he wasn't going to get involved in that it was a problem between Ethan and me, that he wasn't going to take sides. I felt proud of Vincent in that moment. Even though Ethan was his older brother, he had understood that I was right. He told me that if I needed anything, any help, he was there for me. I didn't hear from Ethan for the rest of that week. He didn't call, he didn't come to the house, he didn't send any messages. It was as if he had completely disappeared from my life. Part of me was worried, but the other part knew he was fine, that he was just angry because he hadn't gotten what he wanted. On Wednesday afternoon, I was watering the plants in the garden when my neighbor Mrs. Davis came over. She had been living next door for 15 years, and we always had a good relationship. She asked about Ethan and Rebecca, saying she hadn't seen them arrive for several days. I told her what had happened without going into too much detail. Mrs. Davis listened attentively and then said something I didn't expect. "I'm so glad you finally set some boundaries with them, Marissa. That girl always struck me as very arrogant." I was surprised that Mrs. Davis had noticed Rebecca's behavior. I asked her what she had seen, and she told me that several times she had heard Rebecca yelling at the girl who helped me with the cleaning, treating her like she was her personal servant. She also told me that one day Rebecca had parked her car blocking Mrs. Davis's driveway, and when she had kindly asked her to move it, Rebecca had responded very rudely to wait 5 minutes, that she had more important things to do. These stories confirmed that I wasn't exaggerating. Rebecca really was a disrespectful person, not just with me, but with everyone. The problem was that Ethan was so blinded by her that he couldn't see her true personality. On Friday night, I was watching television when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard Ethan's voice. It sounded different, more tired, more defeated than the previous Sunday. "Mom, it's me. I'm calling from a coworker's phone. Why aren't you calling from your cell? My phone got shut off and I don't have the money to turn it back on right now." It saddened me to hear that. Ethan had always been very careful with his money, always had his expenses under control. If he didn't have money for his phone, it meant they were really having financial difficulties. "How have you been?" I asked, although part of me already knew the answer. "Bad. Mom, really bad. We've been in a cheap hotel for a week and we've already run out of money. Rebecca had to borrow from her sister just so we could eat these past few days. And why don't you look for an apartment? We've been to see several, but they all ask for 3 months deposit plus the first month's rent up front. It's like $2,500 that we don't have. Ethan paused for a long time. I could hear him breathing deeply, like when he was a boy and was about to cry. Mom, I need to ask you a favor. Could you lend us the money for the apartment? I promise we'll pay you back in 6 months. Ethan, you know I don't have that kind of money saved up. The $3,000 I had saved I gave you for your wedding, remember? But you could take out a loan from the bank. You have the house as collateral. Please, Mom, we're desperate. No, Ethan, I'm not going into debt to solve a problem that you two created. If you had been respectful to me, you would still be living in my house without paying rent. You chose another path. He was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice changed, became harder, more resentful. Really, Mom? Are you really going to let your son end up on the street because of your pride? You're not going to end up on the street, Ethan. You have a job, you have hands, you're capable. Look for a cheaper room to rent. Look for an apartment that doesn't require such a large deposit. Talk to your boss about getting an advance on your salary. There are many options. But none of those options are as easy as you forgiving me and giving me the keys back. Exactly. None are as easy. But life isn't always easy, Ethan. I worked for 30 years to build this house. Your father died when you were teenagers, and I kept going. I didn't have anyone to solve my problems for me. Ethan sighed deeply again. I could feel his frustration through the phone. Okay, Mom, I get your message, but I want you to know that Rebecca is very hurt. She says you never accepted her, that you treated her badly from day one. Ethan, I welcomed that woman into my house with open arms. I made her feel welcome. I tried to make her feel comfortable. If she feels rejected, it's because her own conscience is telling her she treated me badly. That's not true. Rebecca has always been respectful to you. Respectful, Ethan. Are you listening to yourself? Suggesting I leave my own house is respectful. She was angry when she said that. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. I get angry sometimes too, Ethan, but I would never dream of disrespecting someone in their own home. Education and respect aren't lost just because you're angry. Ethan didn't respond to that. He knew I was right, but he wouldn't admit it. His loyalty to Rebecca prevented him from seeing reality objectively. Well, Mom, I have to go. I just wanted you to know how we're doing. Ethan, before you hang up, I want to tell you something. The door to this house will always be open for you. You are my son and I love you. But I will not allow anyone to disrespect me in my own home, not even your wife. And if Rebecca apologizes, if she admits she was wrong, if she apologizes to me for real with sincerity, acknowledging specifically what she did wrong, then we could talk. But it has to be a real apology, not just empty words to get me to open the door. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he told me he would talk to Rebecca, that he would try to convince her to apologize to me. We hung up without saying goodbye, just like on Sunday. I couldn't sleep well that night. On one hand, it saddened me to know Ethan was having financial difficulties. On the other hand, I knew it was necessary for him to learn that decisions have consequences, that he couldn't expect me to solve all his problems while he allowed me to be disrespected. On Saturday morning, I decided to call Vincent to tell him about Ethan's call. Vincent told me that he had also spoken with Ethan, that his brother had asked to borrow money, but he had refused. He explained that he didn't refuse out of stinginess, but because he knew that if he solved their money problem, Ethan would never learn his lesson. He said that sometimes you have to let people hit rock bottom for them to reflect on their mistakes. Vincent also told me that he had done a little research on Rebecca. Out of curiosity, he had spoken with some acquaintances who worked at the same company as her. They had told him that Rebecca had a reputation for being difficult, that she had had problems with several coworkers because of her arrogant attitude. He also said that an acquaintance had told him that Rebecca had been married before, but her first marriage had lasted less than 2 years. Apparently, there had been serious problems with the first husband's family, who accused her of being materialistic and manipulative. This information worried me a lot. If Rebecca had had similar problems in the past, it meant that her behavior with me was not a coincidence. It was a pattern of behavior that repeated in her family relationships. On Sunday afternoon, I was reading in my garden when I heard someone knock on the door. I peeked through the window and saw a woman I didn't know. She was young, about 30, dressed in a very elegant green dress. She had blonde hair and was wearing expensive sunglasses. When I opened the door, the woman took off her glasses and smiled at me in a way that seemed fake from the very first moment. "Are you Mrs. Marissa Ethan's mom?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "Nice to meet you, ma'am. I'm Susan Rebecca's sister. Could we talk for a moment?" I invited her in, although something told me this visit wasn't going to be pleasant. Susan sat in the living room and looked around my house with the same expression of superiority I had seen so many times in Rebecca's eyes. "Mrs. Miller, I've come to talk to you about the problem you're having with my sister and her husband." "I don't have any problem, miss. They're the ones with the problem. They don't know how to respect their elders." Susan smiled in a condescending way, as if she were talking to a spoiled child. "Look, ma'am, I understand that sometimes it's hard to adapt when a new person joins the family, but Rebecca is a good, hard-working woman who loves Ethan very much. It's not fair that you're punishing them this way." I'm not punishing anyone. I simply decided that only people who respect me will live in my house. "But ma'am, they don't have money to rent an apartment. They're sleeping in cheap hotels, spending money they don't have. Ethan is very depressed. He's lost a lot of weight." It hurt to hear that about Ethan, but I wasn't going to let this woman manipulate me with emotional blackmail. "Your sister and my son are married adults, miss. If they don't have money, it's because they didn't manage it well. That's not my responsibility." Susan's expression changed. The fake smile disappeared, and I saw in her eyes the same disdain I had seen so many times in Rebecca's. "Look, ma'am, I'll be direct with you. My sister told me that you're a very controlling mother-in-law, that you don't let them live in peace, that you're always meddling in their marriage." "Oh, really? And what else did your sister tell you?" "That you're very possessive of Ethan, that you don't accept that he's a married man now that you need to cut the umbilical cord." I listened to everything Susan said and realized that Rebecca had invented a completely different version of the events. In her story, I was the controlling villain, and she was the innocent victim. "Miss, I'm going to tell you the truth of what happened, and you can believe what you want. For 8 months, I welcomed your sister into my home. I treated her with respect, with affection, as if she were my own daughter." Susan interrupted me with a wave of her hand, as if to say she wasn't interested in my version. "Ma'am, I didn't come here to argue about who is right. I came to ask you to be reasonable. Ethan is your son, your flesh and blood. Are you really going to destroy that relationship over a misunderstanding?" "It's not a misunderstanding. Your sister disrespected me in my own house, and my son defended her by yelling at me as if I were his enemy." Susan stood up and started pacing my living room. I could see she was losing her patience, that she had come expecting to find an old woman who was easy to convince. "All right, ma'am. What do you want? For Rebecca to come and beg for your forgiveness on her knees, for her to kiss your feet? What do you need to give them back the keys to the house?" "I want your sister to acknowledge that she treated me badly, to apologize sincerely. And I want my son to understand that I deserve respect in my own house." Susan laughed in a very unpleasant way. "Ma'am, you're living in the past. Families are different nowadays. Daughters-in-law don't have to obey their mothers-in-law as if they were servants." "I never asked your sister to obey me like a servant. I only asked her to respect me as the owner of the house. You know what, ma'am, I think you're jealous of my sister. Jealous because Ethan doesn't need you as much anymore because he has a young, beautiful wife who loves him." Those words hurt because I knew there was some truth to them. I had felt jealous when Ethan got married, not because I didn't want to see him happy, but because I was afraid of losing him. But that didn't justify the disrespect. "You might have a point, miss. Maybe I was jealous at first, but that doesn't justify your sister treating me badly in my own home." Susan sat back down and changed her strategy again. Now she spoke in a softer, more manipulative voice. "Look, Mrs. Miller, my sister asked me to tell you that she is willing to apologize to you. She recognizes that maybe there were misunderstandings, that maybe some things were said in a bad way." "Maybe. Misunderstandings. Your sister suggested I leave my own house. That's not a misunderstanding, it's a grave lack of respect." "All right, you're right. Rebecca was wrong to say that. She's willing to apologize specifically for that sentence. Not just for that sentence, for her entire attitude for 8 months, for moving my things without permission, for changing my house without asking me, for treating me like I was a burden. Susan sighed deeply. She looked frustrated because she wasn't getting what she came for. Ma'am, let's be practical. Ethan earns $800 a month. With that, they have to pay rent, food, gas, utilities. If you help them by letting them live in your house, they can save money faster to buy their own house. That sounds very logical, miss, but there's something you don't understand. Money isn't the most important thing in life. Dignity and respect are worth more than any savings. Susan looked at me as if I were a foolish old woman who didn't understand the realities of modern life. Ma'am, with all due respect, you're getting older. Wouldn't you rather have your son close, even if there are small conflicts, instead of being alone in this house? I'd rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and humiliated in my own home. That answer seemed to surprise her. I think she expected me to be afraid of loneliness, to be desperate for company at any price. Besides, miss, I'm not alone. I have Vincent, I have my neighbors, I have my lifelong friends. I don't need to put up with disrespect to feel accompanied. Susan stood up again. She already looked annoyed. She had completely lost her patience. All right, ma'am. I see you're very stubborn, but I want you to know that my sister is suffering a lot. She's crying every day because she doesn't understand why you hate her so much. I don't hate your sister, miss. I just won't allow her to disrespect me. Ethan is suffering too. He's very thin, very depressed. He says he feels like he's lost his mom. He hasn't lost me. I'm still his mom and I will always love him. But love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Susan walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned to me one last time. Ma'am, I hope that when you see your son on the street begging, you can sleep soundly knowing it was your pride that put him there. Those words hit me hard, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with dramatic threats. My son is not going to end up on the street, miss. He's smart, hardworking, capable. If he's having difficulties, it's because he chose to defend a disrespectful woman instead of respecting his mother. Susan left my house, slamming the door. I watched her from the window as she walked to her car, talking on the phone. She was surely reporting to Rebecca that her mission had failed, that the stubborn mother-in-law hadn't given in to her manipulations. I felt very sad that afternoon. Susan's visit had stirred up a lot of emotions. On one hand, it had confirmed that Rebecca really was a manipulative person who had distorted the whole story to make herself look like the victim. On the other hand, it hurt to know that Ethan was really suffering. But I knew that if I gave in now, if I gave them the keys back without any real change, everything would be worse than before. Rebecca would feel victorious. Ethan would learn that he could disrespect me without consequences, and I would lose my dignity in my own house forever. That night I called Vincent and told him about Susan's visit. He was very angry when I told him the things she had said to me, especially the threat that Ethan could end up on the street. Mom, that woman tried to manipulate you with emotional blackmail. Ethan isn't going to die from renting a room while he saves for an apartment. Thousands of people live like that. Vincent was right, but it was still hard for me not to feel guilty about Ethan's situation. On Monday morning, I received a call I didn't expect. It was from Ethan's work. A very kind young lady asked me if I knew where my son was because he hadn't shown up for work and hadn't called in. I was very worried because Ethan had never been irresponsible with his job. I told her I didn't know where he was, but to let me know if they found him. After hanging up, I was very uneasy. Ethan had been working at that company for 5 years. He had a good position, earned well. If he started missing work without notice, he could lose his job. I tried calling his cell phone, but he still didn't answer. I called Vincent to ask if he knew anything about his brother, but he hadn't heard from Ethan since the previous week either. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Ethan, but his voice sounded very strange, as if he had been drinking. Mom, it's me. Ethan, where are you? Work called me looking for you. I'm at a bar near the hotel. I didn't go to work because I couldn't sleep all night. Rebecca and I had a really bad fight. What happened? Susan told Rebecca about her conversation with you yesterday. Rebecca got furious because she says you humiliated her in front of her sister. She says she doesn't want to apologize to you anymore, that she'd rather we find another solution. And what solution are you going to find? I don't know, Mom. I don't know what to do anymore. Rebecca says that if I really love her, I should cut you off completely. That as long as you're a part of my life, she'll never be happy. Ethan paused for a long time. I could hear background noise music from the bar where he was. Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you really never going to forgive Rebecca? Do you really prefer to lose me forever? Ethan, I don't want to lose you. You're my son, and I love you more than my own life. But I can't pretend that nothing happened. Your wife disrespected me gravely, and you defended her instead of defending me. But Mom, she's my wife. It's normal for me to defend her. It's also normal to defend your mother when someone disrespects her in her own house. Ethan started to cry. I could hear him clearly through the phone. It broke my heart to hear him like that, but I knew I had to stay firm. Mom, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. If I choose Rebecca, I lose you. If I choose you, she's going to leave me. I can't win in this situation. Ethan, nobody is asking you to choose. The only thing I'm asking for is respect. If Rebecca respects me, if she acknowledges that she was wrong, everything can go back to normal. But she says you never accepted her, that you treated her badly from day one. She says she has no reason to apologize because you started the problem. Ethan, do you really believe that? Do you believe I treated your wife badly? There was a very long silence. I knew Ethan was struggling internally between what he had seen and what Rebecca had made him believe. I don't know what to believe, Mom. Rebecca tells me one thing, you tell me another. You two see the same situation in completely different ways. Ethan, I've known you since you were born. Have you ever in your life seen me treat a guest badly in my house? Have you seen me be rude or disrespectful to anyone? No, Mom. You've always been very polite to everyone. So why do you think I would change with your wife? What reason would I have to treat her badly if all I wanted was for you to be happy? Ethan was quiet again. I could hear him crying harder. Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared of losing Rebecca, but I'm also scared of losing you. I don't know how to fix this. Son, the solution is very simple. Rebecca needs to admit that she treated me badly. She doesn't need to humiliate herself or beg. She just needs to apologize sincerely and promise that she will respect me. But she says she didn't do anything wrong, that she was just defending herself from your attacks. My attacks, Ethan, when did I ever attack your wife? Tell me one time I yelled at her that I said something offensive to her. Ethan couldn't answer because he knew I was right. In all the months Rebecca lived in my house, I never yelled at her, never insulted her, never disrespected her. Mom, I'm going to talk to Rebecca again. I'm going to try to make her understand that she needs to apologize to you. Son, but before that you need to go to work. You can't lose your job over these problems. Without a job, you'll be worse off than you are now. You're right. I'm going to the office right now to apologize to my boss. Ethan, one more thing. Stop drinking. Alcohol won't solve any problems. It will only create new ones. Yes, Mom, you're right. I love you. I love you too, son. Take care of yourself. After hanging up, I kept thinking about the conversation. It was the first time in weeks that Ethan had admitted even indirectly that I was right. It was also the first time he had shown doubts about the version of events Rebecca had told him. On Tuesday afternoon, I received another unexpected call. This time, it was Rebecca. Her voice sounded different, less arrogant, more nervous. Mrs. Miller, it's Rebecca. Could we talk? Of course. What do you need? Ethan told me that you're willing to forgive me if I apologize to you. I wanted to know exactly what you need to hear from me. I was surprised she was so direct. I expected more manipulation, more drama. Rebecca, I need you to specifically acknowledge how you disrespected me. I can't accept a generic apology for misunderstandings. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing deeply, as if preparing for something difficult. Okay, I acknowledge that it was wrong for me to tell you to leave your own house. That was very rude of me. What else? It was also wrong for me to move things around without asking you. It's your house, and I should have respected your way of organizing it. I was surprised she was admitting these things so easily. But something in her tone of voice told me she wasn't being completely sincere. Rebecca, why are you suddenly willing to acknowledge these things? Last week your sister told me you hadn't done anything wrong. Because Ethan is in a really bad place, ma'am. He hasn't slept well in days. He's barely eating. He's drinking a lot. I'm afraid he's going to lose his job or get sick. There was the truth. She wasn't apologizing because she was truly sorry, but because the situation had become unbearable, and she needed everything to go back to normal. Rebecca, a real apology comes from the heart, not from desperation. If you're only apologizing to me to solve your financial problems, then it's worthless. No, ma'am, it's not just because of the financial problems. It's also because I've realized that maybe I didn't handle the situation well when I moved into your house. Maybe. Okay, I didn't handle it well. I was wrong. I acknowledge that I treated you with little respect, and that caused problems between you and Ethan. Rebecca, I need to know something else. Do you really love my son? Of course I love him. Ethan is a wonderful, hard-working, honest man. I love him very much. If you love him so much, why did you ask him to cut me off completely? Why did you put him in the position of having to choose between his wife and his mother? Rebecca took a long time to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded smaller, more vulnerable. Because I was jealous, ma'am. Jealous of the relationship you have with Ethan. He talks about you with so much love, so much respect. Sometimes I felt like I would never be as important to him as you are. That confession surprised me. It was the first time Rebecca had shown any emotional honesty. Rebecca, a mother's love and a wife's love are different. One doesn't have to compete with the other. I never tried to keep Ethan away from you. I just wanted you to respect me. I know, ma'am. Now I realize that I reacted badly because of my own fears, but I really want to fix things. What do I need to do for you to forgive us? I told Rebecca I needed time to think. That a phone conversation wasn't enough to solve months of problems. That if she really wanted to fix things, she would have to come to my house and talk face-to-face without Ethan present. Rebecca agreed to come that same afternoon. After hanging up, I was very nervous. Part of me wanted to believe there was a real change in her, but another part was suspicious of her motives. Around 5 in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, I saw Rebecca standing there with a bouquet of red flowers and a face I had never seen on her. She looked tired, without makeup, with dark circles under her eyes, very different from the arrogant woman who had lived in my house for 8 months. Mrs. Miller, I brought you these flowers as an apology. Thank you, Rebecca. Please come in. She sat in the living room in the same spot she had always sat when she lived here, but now she looked small, vulnerable. She kept her hands on her knees and avoided looking me directly in the eyes. Rebecca, I need you to tell me the truth about something. Does Ethan know you came here? No, ma'am. He's at work. I decided to come alone because I thought we could talk more honestly this way. I thought it was good that she had come without Ethan. It showed that at least she was willing to face the situation directly. Rebecca, on the phone, you told me you recognized you had acted badly, but I need to understand why you acted that way. Did you really believe I was treating you badly? Rebecca sighed deeply, and for the first time looked me in the eye. Ma'am, the truth is, I come from a very different family than yours. My parents divorced when I was a child. My mother always told my sister and me not to trust anyone, that everyone tries to take advantage of you. She continued speaking in a voice that got quieter and quieter. When I met Ethan and he talked so much about you with so much affection, I thought you would try to control him to keep him away from me. I came to your house on the defensive, expecting trouble. And what did you find when you arrived? I found a kind lady who welcomed me, who cooked for me, who tried to make me feel welcome, but I couldn't believe it. I thought it was an act that deep down you hated me. Rebecca, why didn't you tell me what you were feeling? Why didn't we talk about your concerns? Because I was afraid that if I showed my insecurities, you would use them against me. I preferred to attack first before you attacked me." It hurt to hear that because I realized that Rebecca had spent months torturing herself with fears that were only a product of her own insecurities. "Rebecca, I never had any intention of hurting you. All I wanted was for us to be a happy family." "I know, ma'am. Now I realize that all my fears were baseless. But I had already caused so much damage that I didn't know how to fix things." "And why do you want to fix them now?" "Because I see Ethan destroying himself over this situation. He doesn't tell me, but I know he misses this house a lot. He misses watching TV with you in the afternoons. He misses telling you about his work. I also realize that if Ethan loses his relationship with you because of me, one day he will blame me, and I don't want our marriage to be built on the destruction of his family." Those words surprised me. It was the first time Rebecca had shown real emotional maturity. "Rebecca, are you truly sorry for how you treated me?" "Yes, ma'am. I am very sorry. I was rude, disrespectful, selfish. I had no right to treat you badly in your own house. I had no right to ask you to leave here." Her eyes filled with tears. They seemed like genuine tears, not manipulative ones. "Ma'am, I know my apologies might sound empty after everything that happened, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry. If you give me another chance, I swear I will be the daughter-in-law you deserve." "Rebecca, a second chance is earned with actions, not with words. If you come back to this house, how will you show me that you've really changed? I will respect your rules, your schedules, your way of organizing the house. I will ask for your permission before changing anything. I will help you with the chores without you having to ask me. And if we have a disagreement, if there's a problem, we will talk like adults with respect. I won't involve Ethan in our problems. If we can't resolve something between us, we'll seek outside help." I was quiet for a moment, observing Rebecca. She seemed sincere, but I had learned to be cautious. "Rebecca, I need to ask you a difficult question. If things don't work out between us, if we have problems again, are you willing to find another place to live without creating drama?" "Yes, ma'am. If I can't adapt to living in your house with respect, then I recognize that the problem is me, and we will find another place." "And Ethan? Is he willing to support that decision?" "I haven't talked to him about this yet, but I'm going to speak to him clearly. I'm going to tell him that if I disrespect you again, he doesn't have to defend me, that you are his mother, and you always deserve respect." Rebecca stood up and walked over to where I was sitting. She knelt in front of me and took my hands. "Mrs. Miller, I ask for your forgiveness from the bottom of my heart. Forgive me for being disrespectful. Forgive me for causing problems between you and Ethan. Forgive me for making you feel uncomfortable in your own home." Real tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time since I had known her, Rebecca looked genuinely vulnerable and sorry. "Please give me a second chance. I promise to be the daughter you never had. I promise to take care of you, respect you, and love you as you deserve." I started to cry too. All those months of pain, of humiliation, of feeling rejected in my own home came out in the form of tears. "Rebecca, stand up. You don't need to kneel." I helped her up and hugged her. It was the first time we had hugged since her wedding. I felt that there really was a change in her, that her apologies were sincere. "All right, Rebecca, I'm going to give you a second chance, but I need you to understand that this is the only one. If there are problems again, there won't be a third chance. I understand perfectly, ma'am. I won't let you down. When do you want to come back? Could we come back tonight? Ethan is very depressed, and I think coming back to his home would do him a lot of good." "Yes, you can come back tonight, but first Ethan and I need to talk. He also needs to understand some things." Rebecca nodded her head. "Do you want me to tell him to come now?" "No. It's better if you go get him and you come together. I need to talk to both of you at the same time to establish the rules for living together." Rebecca headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned to me one last time. "Ma'am, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I won't waste it." After she left, I sat in the living room processing everything that had happened. Part of me was happy that there was finally a possible solution. Another part was nervous, because I knew that second chances are more fragile than first ones. I went to the kitchen and made coffee for 3 people. I also took out some cookies I had made the week before. If Ethan and Rebecca were coming back, I wanted to receive them in the best way possible. An hour later, I heard Ethan's car pull up. I looked out the window and saw them get out together. Ethan looked nervous. Rebecca walked very close to him as if giving him moral support. When they knocked on the door, I took a deep breath before opening it. It was the moment of truth, the moment to know if we could really be a family again, or if all this was just a temporary illusion. I opened the door and saw my son standing there with a face that broke my heart. Ethan had lost a lot of weight. He had deep, dark circles, a neglected beard. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in these 2 weeks. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up like when he was a child. "Mom," he said with a broken voice and threw himself into my arms. I hugged him tightly, feeling him tremble in my arms. My son, my baby, had suffered so much because of this situation. We both cried without saying anything for several minutes. Rebecca stood in the doorway waiting. When we finally separated, I invited her to come in too. "Come on, let's sit down. We have a lot to talk about." In the living room, Ethan sat next to me on the sofa very close, as if he were afraid it was a dream and I would disappear. Rebecca sat across from us, her hands clasped, nervous, but with a more humble expression than I had ever seen on her. "First, I want you both to know that I love you. Ethan, you are my son, and nothing will ever change that. Rebecca, you are my son's wife, and therefore you are also part of my family." Ethan took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "Mom, forgive me for yelling at you. Forgive me for disrespecting you in your own house. I have no excuse for what I did." "I know, son, and I forgive you. But I need you to understand something very important. I will always support you, but I will never again allow you to disrespect me no matter the circumstances." Ethan nodded his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I understand, Mom. I will never yell at you again. I swear on my dad's memory." Rebecca cleared her throat gently. "Ma'am, I also want to apologize to you in front of Ethan. I want him to hear what I said to you in private this afternoon." She turned to Ethan, but without taking her eyes off me. "Ethan, I treated your mother badly. I was rude, disrespectful, selfish. I said horrible things to her that I had no right to say. Your mother never treated me badly. I was the one who acted terribly." Ethan looked at her surprised. It was obvious he didn't expect such a direct confession. "Why, Rebecca? Why did you do that?" "Because I was scared, love. Scared that your mom would try to keep you away from me. I come from a family where everyone hurts each other, and I thought that's how all families worked." Rebecca stood up and walked over to Ethan. "But your mom showed me I was wrong. She never tried to keep me away from you. All she wanted was respect in her own house, and I didn't give it to her." Ethan hugged her, and they both cried together. Seeing them like that gave me hope that we could really get through this crisis. "Now," I said, "we need to establish some clear rules so this doesn't happen again." They both looked at me attentively. "First rule. This is my house, I am the owner, and my decisions are respected. I'm not being controlling, I'm being the owner of my own home." They both nodded. "Second rule. Any changes in the house are discussed with me first. Furniture decorations, plants, organization. Everything is consulted." "Perfect, Mom," Ethan said. "Third rule. If there is a problem between Rebecca and me, you two cannot automatically take sides. We have to talk like adults and resolve conflicts with respect." Rebecca timidly raised her hand. "Ma'am, what if I don't agree with one of your rules? How do we handle that?" "Very good question, Rebecca. If you don't agree with something, you tell me with respect, and we explain our points of view. But in the end, since it's my house, my decision is final." Rebecca nodded. "That seems fair, ma'am." "Fourth rule," I continued. "Ethan, you can never yell at me again to defend your wife. If you think I'm being unfair to Rebecca, you tell me calmly and respectfully." "You're right, Mom. That was my biggest mistake." And fifth rule, we all contribute to making this house a happy home. Rebecca, you will help with the chores. Ethan, you will continue to be the loving son you always were, and I will try to be more patient and communicative. The rules seemed reasonable to everyone, but I needed to make something else clear. Now the most important thing. This second chance is the only one there will be. If we have serious problems again, we're not going through all this drama again. You will find another place to live with no hard feelings, but with no exceptions." Ethan looked at me worried. "Mom, really no more chances?" "Ethan, son, I'm 69 years old. I don't have the time or energy to be fighting in my own house. I want to live my final years in peace, surrounded by people who love and respect me." Rebecca stood up and walked towards me. "Mrs. Miller, you have my word of honor that you won't need to give us another chance. I will show you every day that I deserve to be in this family." "I trust you, Rebecca." The three of us hugged together. It was the first time in almost a year that I felt whole, that I felt like I had a real family again. "Ethan," I said, "go get your things. It's time for you to come home." That night, we had dinner together for the first time in weeks. Rebecca offered to cook, but I told her it would be better if we cooked together, that it was a good way to start really getting to know each other. While we prepared dinner, Rebecca told me more about her family, about her difficult childhood, about her fears. I began to understand why she had acted so defensively. It didn't justify her behavior, but at least I could comprehend it. Ethan looked more relaxed than I had seen him in months. He sat at the kitchen table, telling us about his work, laughing at the jokes Rebecca and I made. It was as if he had gotten his family back. After dinner, we sat in the living room to watch television like we used to. Rebecca snuggled up next to Ethan, but every now and then she would make comments to me about the show, including me in the conversation. Before they went to bed, Ethan came up to me. "Mom, thank you for giving us this second chance. I promise you'll never have to doubt my love and respect for you again." I hugged him tightly. "Son, you are the most important thing in my life. Everything I did was to protect our relationship, not to destroy it." Rebecca came over too. "Ma'am, thank you for teaching me what it means to be part of a real family. I will honor the trust you're giving me." I went to bed early that night, but I couldn't fall asleep immediately. I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. The weeks of loneliness, of pain, of feeling rejected in my own house. But I also thought about the lesson I had learned. Sometimes it's necessary to lose something temporarily to truly value it. Ethan had had to lose the comfort of my home to realize what it meant to him. Rebecca had had to see Ethan suffering to understand that her behavior had consequences, and I had had to be willing to be alone to reclaim my dignity. The following months were different. Rebecca kept her word. She helped me with the cleaning without being asked. She asked me before changing anything. When we had different opinions, she expressed them with respect and accepted my decisions. Hugo became the loving son he had always been, but now with a new maturity. He had learned that loving his wife didn't mean disrespecting his mother. One day, 6 months later, I was watering my plants in the garden when Rebecca came over. "Ma'am, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Rebecca." "How did you manage to be so strong? How did you have the courage to kick us out of the house knowing you could lose Ethan forever?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Rebecca, when you're a single mother and you have to raise 2 sons, you learn that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect what's most important." "And what was most important to you?" "My dignity. Because without dignity, nothing else is worth anything. I'd rather be alone and respected than accompanied and humiliated." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "Ma'am, thank you for teaching me that lesson. Now I understand why Ethan loves you so much." That afternoon, while I was having coffee in my garden, I felt completely at peace. I had gotten my family back, but more importantly, I had gotten respect back in my own home. Because sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose. And I had been willing to lose everything so as not to lose the most valuable thing I have, my dignity. My house was my house again, and for the first time in a long time it truly felt like a